Are you able to hear me now? Okay, so I'll make a start for today then. So welcome to this meeting of the Regulatory Committee. I'm Councillor Huntley and I will be chairing the meeting. A couple of practical issues to highlight. We have no fire drill planned, so if there is a fire alarm, please make your way out of the building in a calm and orderly fashion, as guided by staff using the main staircase and using the War Memorial as a muster point at the front of City Hall. Anyone with mobility issues should gather in the foyer on the right-hand side as you leave the Mancroft room here, near to the balustrade, where assistance will be provided. Toilets are at the far end of the corridors, either side of the council chamber. Ladies to the right as you leave, gents to the left. Members of the committee may use electronic devices to access their meeting papers, and visitors are welcome to use mobile phones and other devices, including cameras, but please use them discreetly, set them to silent, and do not use voice or camera flash functions. This meeting is being live streamed on the council's YouTube channel. I'll just go around now and have everybody introduce themselves, members and officers. So if I could start on my left here.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Councillor Claire Kidman.
Thanks very much. I'm Councillor Gurpreet Padda.
Thank you. Councillor Richard Laws.
Councillor Julie Young.
Councillor Jess Carrington.
Councillor Caroline Ackroyd.
Councillor Kate Oliver.
Councillor Liam Calvert.
Councillor Adam Giles, and I'm the Cabinet Member for Planning and Regulatory Services.
Vicky Hobbs, Regulatory Services Manager.
Tiffany Bentley, Licensing Team Leader.
Robert Carmichael, Democratic Services Manager.
Leonie Berwitt, Senior Committee Officer.
Thank you very much, everybody. That's everybody in the room with us today. So moving through the agenda now, we've received apologies from councillors Catt, Stuteley and Worley. Thank you very much, Councillor Calvert, for substituting for Councillor Catt. Can I just check whether there are any declarations of interest before we start? And I can't see any, so we'll move on. We've received no public questions or petitions, so the next thing we need to do is elect the Vice Chair for licensing. I'd like to propose Councillor Kidman as Vice Chair. Thank you very much. Do I have any other proposals? In which case, can we confirm Councillor Kidman as the Vice Chair? Everyone's in agreement? Thank you very much. Right, we now move to item 5, which is the minutes for the licensing committee meetings that took place on the 5th of December and the 16th of January. For everyone who was present at those, can we confirm those minutes as accurate? Yes, Councillor Oliver.
I can't remember back as far as 5th of December of last year, but I'm fairly sure I was a member of the committee, so I don't know, I'm not on the apologies list or present.
I'll look into that.
Thank you. I check back in my diary.
Yeah, we can confirm and amend as needed there. Other than that, are people happy that those are an accurate record? Councillor Calvert.
I just wanted to comment that the minutes seemed a bit sparse compared to normal, in my opinion, but their accuracy was not to be contested.
Okay. I think they give us a record of what happened, maybe more succinct than other times, but yes, we nonetheless do have a record. Okay, with the minutes confirmed, we move to item 6, which is the caravans policy. I'll hand over to, is it Tiffany or Vicky? Vicky, you'll be presenting.
I think
Oh, sorry. I'm handing over to Councillor Giles, of course. Apologies.
Thank you, Chair. As set out in the report, Norwich City Council owns the freehold for a residential caravan site for Gypsy, Roma and Travellers GRT on Swanton Road. Historically, this site was managed by Norfolk County Council and therefore didn't require a licence to manage it. The site has now been leased to Broadland Housing Association to manage, and this has necessitated the establishment of the draft residential caravan site licensing model standards, which are before you today following public consultation. In the production of these standards, we've taken account of the national model standards for multi-occupancy sites in relation to developing our local model standards for single occupancy sites, often GRT, such as Swanton Road, as well as multi-occupant sites, of which we currently have none in Norwich. When attaching the model standards to site licenses, each site and relevant conditions must continue to be assessed on a site-by-site basis on its own merits. Those of a GRT ethnicity face significant inequalities in health and educational outcomes. As ever, decent housing lies at the heart of improving these inequalities in outcomes, and these standards seek to support this community by ensuring that their accommodation is safe, adequately spaced and hygienic, while respecting their historic culture and traditions. There were no formal responses to the public consultation on these draft standards. The consultees are set out. I'll pass back over to the chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Giles.
I should unless Vicky or Tiffany have anything else to add.
No further comments. Thank you very much, Councillor Giles, for that. Are there any comments, questions indeed, from the committee? Councillor Oliver.
This might be my oversight, but as a family, it would be classed as a family group, so it is extended family as well. So it would be blood relatives, so cousins and uncles, aunts, that sort.
Councillor Carrington.
Thank you.
If you wish to, please do.
Okay, no, I just wanted to establish, it's on page on page 20. On page 23, when it talks about domestic refuge storage and dispersal, I would like to know how the council would be able to monitor that, and potentially what support would be given to vulnerable people who may not be able to manage it. For example, somebody with some kind of mental health difficulty.
The domestic refuge and storage would be basically the waste disposal on the site. So, for example, there would be wheelie bins or contracted waste collections from that site. In terms of people who are unable to manage, it would be up to the site manager to manage that. If they ask for help, obviously, if they don't notify that they need help, then it would be impossible to identify who that would be.
Okay, thank you. If there were no further comments or questions, can I suggest that we move to voting to adopt this policy? Could I have somebody to second that, please? Councillor Ackroyd, thank you very much. Are we all happy to adopt this policy? I think that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Having visited it, it's an excellent facility. Yes, I think this is something very positive. Great, thank you very much for that. We now move to item 7 of our overall agenda today, where we look at our Hackney Carriage private vehicle hire drivers policy. Again, I'll hand over to Councillor Giles to make some remarks.
Thank you, Chair. The report summarises draft changes to the Hackney Carriage and private hire driver/operator licensing policies as set out in the appendix to the committee report in accordance with the 5-yearly review process. Table 1's on page 38 of the committee report set out a number of proposed changes to improve passenger safety with single options for change. I don't propose to go through those in detail, but if anyone does have any questions on them, they can of course raise them. Table 2, which is on pages 39 to 41, sets out a number of proposed changes to improve passenger safety with multiple options for change with recommendations for adoption. The recommended options are as follows. City Council penalty points to be valid for 3 years rather than the current 1. City Council penalty points for mobile phone use while driving to increase from the current 3 to 6. To increase checks on driver DBS DVLA status from currently on renewal to 6 monthly throughout the licence period, and to mandate the acceptance of both cash and card payments. It is recommended that CCTV use in vehicles should be optional for licence holders, with some suggested condition wording in the attached appendix. We also recommend that both the knowledge test and the distinction between Hackney carriage and PHV licences should remain in place. The consultation had a strong 230 responses, with responses overall roughly split 50-50 between drivers / operators and the wider public. And I'm conscious you've had some broader breakdown of that consultation distributed to you just before the meeting. I would like to highlight some clarifications which have been rectified subsequent to publication of committee reports for yourselves. In relation to paragraph 4.125, is it, or 6? 4, sorry.
Yeah,
of appendix
4.124.
Yes. I had a computer breakdown. I'm using a previous version of what I wrote. Paragraph 4.124 of Appendix E. This has been amended to align with handling of passengers' lost property as set out in bylaw 17. And I can find the page references for them if that's helpful for you. So paragraph 4.124 of Appendix C, that's on page 125 of your pack. So this has been amended to align with handling of passengers' lost property as set out in bylaw 17, which is on page 132 of your pack. Secondly, in table 2 of the committee report in relation to NCC penalty points for mobile phone use, the current position is 3 penalty points rather than the current the current position is 2 penalty points rather than 3 set out in the report. And in option 2, duration should read number or quantity. In the penalty points appendix C, the regulations cited in D49 should have now been updated to the Road Vehicles Construction and Use Amendment Regulations 2022. And I would like to thank Councillor Calvert for highlighting the latter 2 clarifications of those. I would like to stress that where changes have not been made yet to policies in the appendix to reflect recommendations, these will be made prior to the revised policies being adopted. The policies in the appendix are being reviewed to clarify distinct references to applicants and existing licence holders, and also to clarify distinct references to DVLA penalty points and City Council penalty points. We are happy to take questions and comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Giles, for that. Vicky or Tiffany, is there anything you'd like to add at this stage?
Nothing further to add.
Okay, thank you. Tiffany.
just one thing to say as well. It will be kind of corporatized is the word I want to use, but through the comms process and formatted properly, and kind of with the appropriate layout and so on as well. But it's just the content today. It will look, we'll have the magic touch of the communications team to make it a proper policy document as well.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to propose that we focus on table 1 first. This is on page 38 of the pack we have today. Are there any comments, questions, observations on those 8 proposals in table 1, please? If not, can I propose that we adopt these 8 proposals here? Could I have somebody to second that? I think it was Councillor Kidman first there. And if we can vote on the options we have here in table 1 at this stage. Thank you very much. That's unanimous. We'll now move to table 2. I propose again here we perhaps take this table in parts. So I would like to suggest the first item we look at here is the last one listed on page 41, mandatory to accept card payments, where we have 2 options here. Are there any questions or comments, observations on this particular point? No. In which case, can I propose that the suggested change here, so point 2 in the table, is the one that we adopt? Could I have somebody to second that, please? I think Councillor Calvert was first there. Can we vote on accepting that? That's unanimous. Thank you very much, everybody. If we now move to the top of page 40, frequency of checks, DBS, DVLA. Again, we have 2 options here, retaining the current policy and change to every 6 months. Any thoughts, comments, observations on this, please? Councillor Padder.
Thank you. I just wondered, months, what are the costs attributed to those checks? Do you happen to know those costs?
So in the current situation is it would be an additional, so sorry, wind back slightly. So the requirement for a DBS check, so that's a criminal record certificate process, is already there. It's upon renewal and first application as well. So the additional cost for the update service is 13, isn't it? It was 12 to 13 pounds. So that's the additional cost for the, and the onus is on the license holder to sign up and keep that live, if you like, that subscription alive. So that's the additional cost in relation to the DBS. The DVLA check at the moment is just done through the share code. So it's free of charge at this point in time. So the requirement would be just to provide that code, same as you do if you're hiring a car, that sort of thing. It's exactly the same process. Share code allows us to then carry out that check to see where they're at with them. There is a possibility, isn't there, that we may well do that in a bulk format. So that at the moment, the provider that we use for the DBS checks is a company called Taxi Plus. So there is scope to be able to do that rather than having to do a manual check for each person, if you like, into data entry for each one. There's a possibility to set that up in a bulk. So here's the list. Could we check those every 6 months? But the current situation is the DVLA free check at the moment.
Thank you for clarifying that. Are there any further comments, questions or observations on this particular point? If not, can I then propose that we adopt point 2 here, a change to every 6 months Can I have somebody to second that, please? That was Councillor Laws. So if we can take a vote on adopting this. And again, that's unanimous. Thank you very much, everybody. I'd now like to look at the next point on page 40, the knowledge test here. Are there any thoughts, comments or observations on this, please? Councillor Padder.
You'll probably get a lot of these questions from me. What does the knowledge test involve?
So the knowledge test for private hire is a list of kind of well-known premises, a lot of pubs, schools, kind of locations where people may get real life jobs too. So we have a kind of randomized list of those, and there's a pass mark of how many they have to achieve on that. So that's the knowledge test, is just kind of point location test. The Hackney drivers, which is kind of the decision is to retain that, but that's routes. So the differentiation between the two types is a kind of more complex and the actual most direct route. But this particular point is a list of locations.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any further comments, questions? Councillor Calvert.
Forgive me, I'm just trying to read quickly through the consultation responses. Did we not ask the public their view on this? I can find the trade's view that they want to retain it, but I can't see the public's view.
We didn't have a specific question on every single alteration because there were loads. We did have that particular one down. That is just trade only, because I think it's quite a specific breakdown in terms of quite often the public just see the taxi trade as a whole, termed like that. So the requirement, or the kind of question, arose because it was an issue brought up by the DFT. So the guidance, Transport says, different to what we are proposing. So their proposal was questioning whether there is a need at all for a knowledge test for private hire drivers. So compounded by the fact that it's a difficult differentiation between the two types. It's not always well publicly known, so it's quite a specific question. So we targeted that question to drivers to trade only, notwithstanding the fact that the whole policy document was part of the consultation as well, though I kind of fully appreciate that people probably didn't go through that line by line. So that's the thinking behind it. The supportive result, so 72, a percentage of 72, sorry, versus 23, and then a neutral of 14, we felt was probably strong enough to warrant that, to kind of demonstrate the difference that does occur within the drivers within the trade, and the support was there. So that it is a slightly different local decision to keep that as opposed to the DFT.
If I might, my concern, I don't have particularly strong views about it, but the question to me that came to my mind is, if you ask people who are in essentially a protected trade because they have to have the knowledge if they want to maintain their protected monopoly status, they're going to say yes, aren't they? Or perhaps I'm misunderstanding.
Potentially no, because if we got rid of the test, it would be easier for them to become a driver. So they wouldn't have to pass the knowledge test to become a driver. So we've asked the trade, and the trade is saying overwhelmingly that we think it's a good idea to test drivers before they get a badge.
Okay, appreciate it.
Are there any other thoughts, comments, observations, questions on this? I mean, I can see lots of reasons why we might want to ensure that drivers do know where they're going here. So in terms of retaining what we have here, I'd like to propose that's what we're doing. if I could have somebody to second that, please, Councillor Ackroyd again. And can we take a vote on that? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. I'd now like to turn back to page 39, where we have some other points to be working through. So the first one raised here, increasing from 1 year to 3 years for penalty points. Any thoughts, comments, observations on this? So this is the top of page 39. So the first part of table 2. Councillor Calvert.
I think this is very welcome. We'll come on to the number of individual points for offences momentarily, but with 2 points issued for certain offences, the idea that an individual taxi driver would rack up 6 offences in 1 year is extremely unlikely, isn't it? In 3 years, I think it's still somewhat unlikely. My inclination would actually be a slightly longer period for points to remain on licenses if we are going to issue as little as 2 points for any particular infraction. So I think it's welcome, but I would actually like it to be longer. I would like to propose, I'm picking a number off the top of my head, 6 years.
Okay, so are you suggesting that as a recommendation, Councillor Calvert?
I will after some debate, if you would like, Chair.
Okay, I'm happy to open it up to debate on that point. So what we've got here is looking at an increase from 1 year to 3 years, and the suggestion here, at this stage, is to increase that to 6 years.
Can I just remind members that this paper and policy has already been out for consultation. We consulted with the public with regards to increasing from 1 year to 3 years. We can't at this stage introduce another recommendation, so the members just need to consider what's in this. What we can do though, Councillor Calvert, is keep it on file for next time we look at the policy, and then look when we review the policy next time, is consider increasing the points then, or the duration of the points, but at this stage we can't consider that as part of the consultation.
Thank you. Can I just check the legal advice on that? I'm conscious that Councillor Giles has signalled his willingness when we come to the phone points to go outside of the consultation. So I think it's apposite that we decide whether that is actually a strict and binding situation or something else.
It's a question of risk. So you've been out to the public and the trade. You've said we are minded to take your view on 3. Thank you for your answers. And we've decided after hearing you, we're going for 6. So it increases the risk of challenge. Yet the most efficient way of ensuring there isn't a challenge is to go out to consultation again on the suggestion for 6. So legally, yes, but it's risky, and I would recommend, if you were going to do it, risk management says have another consultation.
Thank you very much.
My suggestion here is, well, I'll hear from other members of the committee, other thoughts first this stage. Councillor Padder.
I think on that 6-year point, I think in someone's life that's an incredible long period to wait. And if these points are issued based on something, minor, for example, and I don't know what minor is, but, I think 6 years to me sounds like such a long time in somebody who's who may have a family, and there might be implications and other impacts. And I guess I personally wouldn't support that, because I think it's just too much for someone. But on what I wanted to ask was, so like there's anecdotal information, I don't think it's evidence, that points, and I don't know if you've heard this, so this isn't robust at all, that points can be sold, bought and sold on the black market. And I don't know if you've heard it, but that's what I've heard. So I was wondering if you had any thoughts on that.
You've got to remember these are points that us as enforcement officers of Norwich City Council issue. It's not DVLA points. So this is something that we would issue, and it's also worth bearing in mind that the driver's license is only 3 years. So a 6-year limit or or an increase to 6 years for the penalty points would mean that it would span over 2 licence periods, which I think would be unfair.
Councillor Laws.
Thank you, Chair. Just to actually support what Councillor Platt has just said, 6 years is a long time. Just do a thought experiment. If we think ourselves back to June 2019, just 6 years ago, a couple of years before, a year or so before the COVID pandemic, it's a long time, and things can change a lot. It would seem unduly onerous and not within sort of sensible risk management to have such a long period.
Thank you. Councillor Oliver.
Thank you, Chair. I think we also need to consider parity with the surrounding local authorities as well. And can I raise another closely aligned point? I definitely I think the suggestion of 6 years is in recognition of the level of trust that we place in drivers, and we do hold them to we should hold taxi drivers to a higher standard because of the nature of work. But I do notice from sitting on previous subcommittees when something goes wrong, quite often one of the defences is I didn't know, I forgot. And I think anything we can do to standardise things and just make it really clear and easy for people to understand minimises the risk of that.
Thank you very much. Councillor Giles.
Yes, I just want to highlight that it is 3 years for the DVLA, and I suppose there's a question of, do we prove guilt to a higher burden of proof than the DVLA does? And if we don't, then should we be more onerous with our own internal penalty points than the DVLA are?
Mr. Calvert.
Coming back on 2 points. The first is question for Vicky. You said if the points span 2 licence periods, that's a difficulty. Are we proposing that the points fall off the licence every set 3-year period?
No, what I meant is that the licence lasts for 3 years. So if we increased it from the points lasting from what we're saying 1 year currently, or from 3 years to 6 years, it could potentially span 3 licence periods. I'm not saying that once the licenses run out, the points disappear, because that's what currently happens. After 1 year, the points disappeared. And I recall at the last meeting we discussed about the points being increased, or the length of time the points stayed on the licence to be increased to 3 years, so that it doesn't automatically run out at the end of your licence.
Thank you. Yes, I think with respect, with 1 year, they of course can span 2 licenses, can't they? So point to Councillor Giles. The general point of, do we hold drivers to a higher standard than the DVLA? If we don't, we can all go home. There is absolutely no point in a licensing regime that holds it to a lower account than the DVLA.
We take into account both DVLA and NCC penalty points, so it's not a case of us not. So we take into account those DVLA penalty points as well, but should NCC penalty points be greater than DVLA penalty points when we're taking them into account, is the argument.
Can I perhaps suggest, it's evident that there is a debate to be had here.
Can I just withdraw my proposal to make things easier?
Thank you very much, Councillor Calvert. What I was going to say is, given that the advice is we'd need to go out for consultation here, and we might be able to do something that I think arguably improves public safety, we might want to do this now this can be revisited. But thank you, Councillor Calvert. I appreciate you withdrawing the suggestion. Any further comments or points? So, Councillor Maguire. Do you want to use Councillor Giles's? You're fated not to hear or speak in this meeting.
Yeah. I think there's been plenty of debate. We've got this motion on the table. Assuming Councillor Calvert has a seconder, I propose we move to a vote on it.
I'll just move to Councillor Padder, who also wanted to say something here.
Very briefly, I strong comms piece to go with this, instead of enforcement heavy, going towards, shifting people's attitudes and behaviour.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Tiffany. I've just congratulations, elected you, Tiffany.
Yeah. Thank you. It's just in terms of like the kind of practical use of such a penalty points. There has been one in the policy previously, but it really hasn't been used that much on that point. So now we're in the position where we do have enforcement officers dedicated to that. I think it's something that we need to kind of utilise maybe, and sort of actually carry it out, see how it's looking. Maybe that's the answer, to bring it back as a kind of a update on how it's been used, how often, how frequently, what sort of thing, which it can be looked at again in the future as well. So hopefully that would be something that would be useful in the wider sense, to say enforcement activity would be something to bring up to members on a more regular basis, and we could include that in that, so you get some real life feedback of how it's been used, what points have been used, how effective it's going, that sort of thing.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Maguire has suggested moving to the vote here. I'm happy to second that. So are we happy to take the recommendation here of a change to penalty points for 3 years rather than 1 year? And that's unanimous. Thank you very much, everybody. If we now move to the second item on page 39, so a move to increase penalty points, NCC penalty points for mobile phone use to 6. Councillor Calvert.
Thank you very much for this. So I somewhat went down the rabbit hole of looking at why we would punish mobile phone users so lightly when we also are proposing banning them for 5 years if they are convicted of such an offence. So we had the situation with 2 points, so that's getting caught 6 times, or once by the police in a 5-year ban. And obviously those 2 things weren't aligned. I then looked at what other driving offences we're proposing giving points for, and the answer is almost none. So if I were crossing a zebra crossing and a taxi driver didn't stop and nearly ran me down, I reported it to the council, and my evidence was solid, I'd videoed it in some way. We don't have points for bad driving. We don't have any points for driving without due care and attention, or any other similar driving offences. So I guess my question is, why do we have mobile phone use as on the list and not any of the other driving offences that are common with drivers?
Thank you. Vicky or Tiffany, would you like to respond?
So the answer is that this isn't the only remedy to a problem. So for example, I suppose it's so many things could happen if an enforcement officer witnessed somebody kind of driving their taxi straight over the zebra crossing, we could look to other actions depending on the severity of it. This is to deal with the more frequently occurring, I don't want to use the word low level to say they're less important, because clearly it depends on the circumstances, but it's to deal with kind of infringements that may happen on a more regular basis. If something bad and severe happened, and we've always got other options of action to take from, you know, appearance before committee straight, you know, bypass the penalty point system. It's an option and a framework of expectation. But if something else happens, we can bring it before members and say, look, this is a situation, you know, there's something severe. Or indeed police matter if it's that kind of level of criminal activity, and then the burden of proof or the kind of the state to which they're held is going to be higher than a word against word situation. So that's why I mean by the lower level are dealt with by the penalty points. Anything more severe, we've got other alternatives action to take.
I would come back on the lower level offence. The government has, as I recall, 3 offences which it is very keen to mandate long bans from being a taxi driver. They are drink driving, drug driving, and mobile phone use. Mobile phone use being they ask us, and we're proposing to ban users of mobile phones for 5 years from being a taxi driver. I'm struggling to understand how that might be a low level and frequent offence. I mean, if it's a frequent offence, I don't doubt, but a low level offence, I struggle to reconcile the two. I wonder if there's any you can illuminate.
Again, I'm not the police. I don't, you know, we're not qualified to determine what is dangerous driving, and we can't breathalyze people and we can't do drug tests. What we can do though is see people using a mobile phone. So we would use those points if this person's a repeated offender, depending on the use, would then bring them to committee, as Tiffany says, if for repeated offences and where there's been complaints with evidence, for example, dash cam of dangerous driving, you will know that from committees that drivers are brought to committee to determine ultimately whether they think they're fit and proper to drive. But as officers, we can witness a mobile phone use and issue the points as and when, rather than, as Tiffany says, it's word against word. So we can't, in the terms of the police, determine if somebody's drink driving or drug driving, but we can see somebody using a mobile phone. Does that help? Or that confuse things even more?
So I'll let someone else go if they want.
Councillor Oliver.
Is that to say that it's an addition, isn't it? It's something that wouldn't be prosecuted by the police, but it gives us additional powers to keep people safe.
Yeah, these penalty points, it's quite common for authorities to determine a scheme of points, and the points that we've suggested in this pack are fairly standardised across other councils. Indeed, we got a leading solicitor who deals with taxi licensing to have a look at our draft policy. So yeah, it's in addition to what the police can do. This is for ourselves as Norwich City Council to regulate and enforce and ensure compliance with drivers. But as previous councillors have said, we're looking for behaviour change. We don't want to rob people of their livelihood, but we want people to understand that we take this matter seriously.
Councillor Ackroyd.
Can I be guilty, please, as ever, of asking a really possibly naive question? We're talking about mobile phone use. We're talking about picking up your mobile phone. I mean, my local beat manager tells me that I shouldn't be using hands-free anyway because I'm not concentrating. But we are specifically on, you pick up your phone, you take a hand off your steering wheel, but we're not talking about hands-free. We think that's acceptable. Thank you.
Yes. Quite often the kind of dispatch mechanism will be with something that's kind of like yeah, equivalent in a cradle and so on. So yes, we're talking about use of, yeah.
Councillor Giles.
Thanks. I know I made the point to Councillor Calvert over email, but in terms of the distinction between 5 or 7 years for conviction and 6 penalty points for NCC, I think it's important that we, you know, the burden of proof for a criminal conviction is obviously beyond reasonable doubt, whereas an investigation by an NCC licensing enforcement officer based on reports they've received is much is important, but a much weaker burden of proof. And I think that's why the punishments differ so much. I do appreciate it is a very big difference, and personally I would have been in favour of a greater amount of NCC penalty points being issued, but if we wanted to go down that road we'd have to reconsult. At the moment it's 2 penalty points. I think putting it up to 6 is a positive move, positive for passenger safety, alongside a number of these other measures. And we want to make sure we get these over the line, and maybe we can revisit a greater number of penalty points at a later date, but let's get these positive measures over the line.
Okay, thank you. Before I hand over to Councillor Calvert, who's next, just to underscore that, at the moment it's 2. We're looking to increase this to 6. Councillor Calvert.
A point of correction, I think. 4.76 of the proposed policy, page 117 of our pack, says you must not use a handheld telephone or any other handheld device apart from a two-way radio whilst driving. In addition, you must not use any handheld device unless it is entirely voice activated. So, sorry, my apologies, non-handheld device, and that is entirely voice activated. Tiffany earlier said that it's common and expected, to paraphrase, the drivers would be using their mobile phone in a cradle. Our policy says they must not.
It's about a dispatch item, kind of job acceptances on which they tend to do stationary and then go away.
It's just not what the policy says. The policy says, in addition, you must not use any non-handheld device unless it is entirely voice activated. And it says, while driving, and the legal meaning of driving is not stationary in a queue of traffic, it must mean pulled over and stopped the engine. Are we happy that we're going to be punishing drivers for the dispatch devices you've told us are common?
No, because we would have to demonstrate that the device that you're using is not entirely voice activated. So they would have to bring in their device to us, because I don't know what I use voice activation on my phone when I'm driving, so some mobile devices are entirely activated. So again, there would be the burden of proof beyond, not beyond reasonable doubt, but balance of probabilities. If in an instance we saw somebody using a mobile phone, we would have to demonstrate that that was not entirely activated and entirely voice activated. So I don't think what you're saying is that the dispatch would breach this condition. Because you can pick up a phone without actually having to touch it.
Sorry, forgive me. A non-handheld device attached to their dashboard, if they use it in a manner which is not entirely voice activated, it's against our policy. So if I were to cycle past any of our drivers who were using their device with their finger, a not voice activated manner, that would be a breach of our policy. Am I right?
So they should be pulled over, shouldn't they, and stationary and all those sorts of other things. Road legal use of it would be at the side of the road, but otherwise voice activated.
But to answer your question, yes, there would be in breach of the policy, but we would have to evidence that their phone, we would have to have strong evidence that their non-handheld device was not entirely entirely voice activated. So simple answer to your question, yes.
We would be following the policy we've got here, would be how I understand that. Councillor Ackroyd, I've got next, please.
Well, I'm going to continue to slightly deviate from what you're saying. And I totally understand about dispatch, and you've got to talk about that. Could there ever be any guidance for taxi drivers that while they are carrying a fare, they are not actually in conversation with their family about picking up the children? Because I think, for example, which happens, doesn't it? And I feel that is going away from safety. I know it's not specifically what we're talking about at the moment, but it is about safety, and we want safety for the people who, you know, who are going in taxis. And I know it has nothing to do with points, but, you know, it is a concern while we're on the subject. Sorry about that, but thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ackroyd. Yeah, if we stick with the points issue here, I think that would be most helpful. Councillor Maguire next.
I don't want to enter into the pinhead, but if it's in a cradle, it's no longer a handheld device. I don't want to enter into these arguments. I think we've got a proposal here that moves things forward, and I think that's what we need to focus on. It's better than what there was.
Councillor Calvert.
A final one, if you may, if you might indulge me. 4.85 of the policy, page 118, for those following along, is a criminal offence to hold and use a mobile phone or handheld device while driving. In addition, this will be regarded as a serious breach of the Code of Conduct, so serious that we will issue 6 points and not bring them to committee. Am I understanding that correctly?
Well, if they've been criminally convicted, then it would be a 5 or 7 year exclusion from holding a license. If it was just based on reports received to a enforcement officer, it'd be 6 penalty points, because it would be on the balance of probabilities rather than beyond reasonable doubt.
As a final point, the other issues which are breaches are not criminal offences, but are still considered to be matters for the committee. It doesn't say when convicted of a phone use, it just says it is an offence. It's letting them know it is an offence. My general concern is that this policy looks to be a combination of multiple other policies, which are not they're not in concordance with each other. We have policies which come from different sources and are not consistent with each other. And I think it leads us into legal difficulties when we present policies which are not internally consistent. And I think that's my main concern with this. I take Councillor Maguire's point that it's better than what went 5 years before. But at the same time, I think in future we will be well advised to ensure that policies we produce are internally consistent. Thank you.
Thank you. I guess the point here is that by following DVLA guidance here, we are ensuring that greater parity, particularly or specifically rather on the points we've got here, that we are looking to increase the mobile phone penalty points to 6 rather than 2. I'd like to propose that that's adopted. Could I have somebody to second that, please? Councillor Calvert, I think, just pipped you to the post there, Councillor Maguire. If we could vote on that, please. Everybody happy to accept that? That's unanimous. Thank you very much, everybody. If we now move to the third item on page 39, the English proficiency test. Again, I'll invite any thoughts, observations or questions on this. Councillor Padder.
Thank you. Can I ask why we need to do an English proficiency test?
We're proposing to retain the existing system whereby English is just tested through the knowledge test. So
Okay.
we put it forward as an option in the consultation.
Right.
We're not recommending it, but obviously the committee may feel differently.
Okay. Right. Thank you.
Apologies. If there are no further thoughts or questions on this, can I suggest or propose rather that we retain our existing position on this? If I could have somebody to second that, please, Councillor Oliver, and if we could vote on this. Thank you very much, everybody. We now move to where are we? On page 40, single driver license, the third box here. Any thoughts, comments or questions on this? If not, can I suggest that we follow the recommendation to retain the existing policy here? Could I have somebody to second that, please, Councillor Laws? And if we can take a vote on this. Not quite unanimous. So that's everybody for, just to confirm. Those against? So that is carried. Thank you. And if we now move to the item at the bottom of page 40, mandatory CCTV. Again, thoughts, comments or observations on this, please? The Calvert.
This seemed in a background where it seems that trade respondents to our questionnaires generally wanted less regulation and less enforcement than the public at large. This one bucked the trend in that both trade and public were very keen by a margin of 2 to 1 and more for the mandatory introduction of CCTV. I can't help feeling that trade want it, the public want it, and my personal view is it keeps passengers and road users safe. It keeps drivers safe from false allegations. It makes our job as a licensing authority very considerably easier, because when allegations come, in most instances, we can just very quickly check whether the incident occurred or not. Should you be sat in the back of your taxi and feel that the driver is using their phone, you can just contact the licensing agency, they can request the footage, and then you can have the evidence beyond any possible doubt. There's nothing not to like, to my mind.
Thank you very much. Further comments, Councillor Laws?
If we look at the report on page 180, it's clear there are some resource implications, as well as the issues about data protection, if I can put it that way. But more generally, this could give a false sense of assurance, a false sense of security. I understand that incidents involving taxi drivers have taken place actually outside the cab itself, so outside any CCTV. So I think the sensible position is to allow it to be optional, see how it works in practice with those who do adopt it, and base further consideration on that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kidman, did you want to come in?
Yeah, I agree with Councillor Laws. There are significant resource implications that really need to be taken into consideration. I'd also say that the consultation does have a larger percentage for people that would prefer CCTV, but the no's and the neutrals are, on almost as high. I haven't got the page in front of me at the moment, but I think it was about 38 people difference. But the main point I wanted to make was that CCTV within a taxi is not going to be maybe the safety panacea that we might think it is, because there was a recent incident in Norwich, unfortunately, but the incident happened I believe, wholly outside the taxi. And so therefore the CCTV in that case wouldn't have really made a difference, because what would it have proved? It was the incident was outside the taxi. That, I mean, I think that's really the main thing, is that CCTV within a taxi might not necessarily catch everything, and in fact, it could perhaps drive a taxi driver who was intent on harming a member of the public to actually escalate something to much more dangerous, which we really wouldn't want to see, because we're here about safety of passengers.
Yeah, I had Councillor Carrington next.
Thank you. I understand that if we were to, particularly on this item, change our current policy, it does need to be a proportional response to the aim of meeting passenger and driver safety. It would be really helpful to know, in particular, what local circumstances, such as crime statistics against passengers, vulnerable people, drivers, have been taken into account, use of taxis at particular times, and prevalence of types of crimes which affect vulnerable people in the local area, etc., have been taken into account when coming to the officer's recommendation.
Vicky or Tiffany, would you like to respond, please?
We didn't have access to the crime data. The police were aware of the consultation, as were members of the public, so they, consult on this. If we were to go down the route of finding out this information, I can provide it at a later date. I do want to add that the Department for Transport guidance, which this policy is based on, doesn't recommend or mandate CCTV in taxis or private hire vehicles, so which is why we are recommending that we don't make it a mandatory requirement for our drivers and vehicles.
Thank you. A point was raised earlier around resource implications here. Could you perhaps pick up on that and respond to that, please?
In terms of the resource, what if we mandated CCTV within all licensed vehicles, the Norwich City Council would then become the data controller, so that we would have a lot of access to information in terms of private information of individuals using the taxis. That is not something we can resource internally or satisfactory. You also have to remember that these taxis, whilst licensed, they always are a licensed vehicle, but they are used to transport families when they're not working. They're used for private journeys. So whilst their CCTV is in with their vehicle, if it is accidentally activated, then we could access private individuals' lives, and it's not something, I think, in terms of legal sense, and I'm sure David will like to clarify, is something that we wanted to be involved in.
Thank you, Vicky. Perhaps before David clarifies that, I think Councillor Calvert, you wanted to come in first, and then we might hear anything, David, you'd like to say.
Thank you very much. In the report, it says if CCTV driver is fitted, it will be the driver licence holder's responsibility to comply with aspects of the law regarding surveillance equipment via the Information Commission's office. How was it that we would be responsible for that?
If we mandate it, if we're saying you must have it in your vehicle, we would then become the data controller. If we're saying if you want it, ask for permission, we'll approve that, then they become the data controller. But if it's something that we're making a rule for, then we would become the data controller because we're mandating that use.
Thank you for clarifying.
Sorry, just one.
Councillor Calvert, carry on.
Earlier you said the policy that we're following from the DVLA, DFT. My apologies. From DFT, I was unclear whether it said does not recommend recommends not or does not mandate. Which one was it? Sorry.
All of the above. If you look at the DFT guidance, it's saying that we shouldn't be mandating.
Sorry,
it recommends optional.
It says we shouldn't be mandating it, or it does not say we should be mandating it. Do you take my meaning? Are they advising against it, or are they just not advising?
They're advising that we do not recommend or mandate the use of CCTV, so they don't require vehicles that are licensed to have CCTV, or would not expect councils to require them to have CCTV.
Thank you.
David, if I could invite you to make any comments you like at this stage.
It's an interesting and difficult one. I wish I'd done a little more research before attending this committee. I mean, what's going through my head is, why is this different to the very frequent Licensing Act 2003 premises licences obligation to have CCTV in public areas? No one has ever suggested we're the data controller there. The CCTV is held by the premises licence holder, and we go along and see it occasionally. But I can understand, clearly we're not the premises licence holder, and we're not holding their data. Query whether the suggestion is that the CCTV from the private hire vehicles, taxis, is held by the council, in which case I can see, yes, there's logically we would become the data controller. If it stays with the operator and or the driver, it's not clear to me why we become the data controller. So it's a practical point, I think. Sorry, that's not much of an answer, so I'm going round in circles, but
I think, David, that the advice came from the DFT guidance itself. It does actually say within the policy document that if we mandate it, we become the data controller, and that is why a lot of authorities haven't done it.
Thank you. You raise an interesting point entirely there, David. I think there's perhaps further debate to be had around this. As I understand it, the DFT guidance is that we would be liable or we would become responsible rather as data controller. Okay, thank you. I had Councillor Carrington next.
Thank you. Is there any evidence that having CCTV in taxis would have helped us investigate any complaints?
Not that I'm aware of. It's hard to say, isn't it, without it being there, but yeah, not that I'm aware of.
Okay, Councillor Giles.
Thanks, thanks, Chair. I think it'd be good for some further work and some further research to be done into this, so it can be brought back to the committee at a later date. I think at this moment in time, certainly if we assume the DFT's advice is correct, maybe we could challenge it. I think at this moment in time, we don't have sufficient evidence to justify it being a proportionate means of achieving a legitimate aim. So I think if we were to go down that road, we'd need to do more research into that and form a stronger evidence base. There is also the point of the consultation response. Of course, the consultation response didn't highlight that the costs, the additional administrative costs, would then be imposed on them as the licence holders via their fees. If it is specified that, you may have got a different response in the consultation. I might be wrong, of course. Also conscious that we've just, since the consultation, we've seen Uber begin to enter the market in Norwich, and a risk of oversaturation. And if you impose additional costs on existing licence holders, that could be a significant issue. It would be a major resourcing obligation upon our licensing department in the short term if every licence holder in the city overnight was required to have CCTV. So we'd either need to look at funding it through the budget setting process going into 26-27, or by passing that on in fees to drivers, both of which would have to be scoped out in more detail. I think we've got a package of measures before us which significantly improves passenger safety today. If we can approve those, get those over the line, get those implemented, we can then return to this point at a later date, and the committee can take a more informed view.
Thank you, Councillor Giles. I've got Councillor Kidman next.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I too would welcome more exploration into it. So would he. The point I was going to make was that with, as Councillor Giles said, with Uber coming on into the market, again, it's one of those things we can't say for sure. But if operators and drivers were mandated to include CCTV in the cars, and it was prohibitively expensive for some, and it ended up being that there being fewer taxis on the road, then that also has a safety implication, because the more taxis we have operating in Norwich, the more people can use a taxi to get home and therefore get home more safely.
I had Councillor Calvert next. Okay. If there are no further questions or comments on this, so we've had a suggestion of following option 2, change to make mandatory. We've had a few people suggest option 3 here. So I will take that as the one that we vote on. So I'll propose that we follow the third option on page 40 here. Could I have a seconder for that? Councillor Laws, thank you. And all those in favour of that third option here? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. I think the last thing we need to do is just look at page, is it 99, to make a decision between 2 possible options here, Institute for Licensing or Department for Transport. Perhaps Tiffany or Vicky, I don't know if you wanted to make any comments on either of these two. So we're looking at the bottom of page 99, 3.36, and over the page 3.37, where we're making a choice.
I think flowing from which option we choose, it would then affect how we would treat criminal convictions more broadly in the policy. So it's not just limited to those 2 paragraphs.
Yes, true. Yes, we will be going on from here.
So for example, for mobile phone use, the Institute for Licensing recommends 7 years. Department for Transport recommends 5. Just one example.
Yeah. So what we're looking at here in these 2 will have an impact on 3.40 and 3.41. Yes, are there any thoughts or observations? Tiffany first.
It's kind of effectively been covered by the last line of table 1, so the Convictions Assessment Institute of Licensing Standards. So it's just that question of clarification that it's that higher standard, and as Councillor Giles says, it means that some of those parts will be removed in relation following that decision. Some of those are not there. They're just highlighted because they are the option, sort of sets out the practical application of either of those decisions.
Yes.
So they will be removed if as that's been followed.
Yeah. So could you perhaps just be clarifying for people what we will have?
So it's the Institute of Licensing higher standard in terms of convictions policy. Therefore, the redundant paragraphs will be removed.
I think to run through the treatment of each offence would take some time.
Yeah, just so we're clear on what we're using here. Okay, Councillor Calvert.
It'll surprise you not at all to hear that I support the Institute of Licensing and their more safety-orientated approach to licensing. Thank you.
Very much. Any other comments, questions, observations? No. in which case we've concluded everything that we needed for this licensing committee.
Sorry, Chair, we just need to take a vote on the entire policy, whether to recommend, following the recommendations that you've made, that to recommend it further to Cabinet and full council for adoption.
Apologies, I thought that's
Sorry,
what we've been doing as we were going.
On those two, we just discussed the Institute of Licensing and the Institute and the DFT. Yes. Did we make a decision on which one to recommend?
Just to clarify, that was part of table 1 within the on page 38 of the agenda. At the bottom it says that the proposal was for the convictions assessment to use the Institute of Licensing standard.
Oh, we've already agreed that long ago. Oh, I see. My apologies. Right. Okay. Got it.
Yeah, I was just making sure we're clear on what we've got in terms of the papers policy in front of us. So in terms of agreeing what we've taken in parts here, I'll propose that we do agree those. Could I have a seconder for that? Councillor Calvert, thank you very much. All those in favour? And that's unanimous. Thank you very much, in which case that does take us to the end of our business for this licensing committee today. Thank you very much, everybody, for your time in being here. And can I just say thank you very much to the officers for your work on bringing this, pulling this all together and bringing this to the committee. Thank you very much, everybody.